Dear passengers, welcome to your flight with zeroG. Today's destination, the truth. Please stay curious and enjoy the ride.
Hello and welcome at zeroG's Data Waypoint, the podcast where we talk about the role of data and machine learning in commercial aviation. Today I'm joined by our very own Anne-Marie, Principal Data Scientist at zeroG, with whom I will be talking about data-driven decision-making and data literacy and how important it is to utilize data in each and every decision that commercial airliners and managers make. So welcome, Anne-Marie, at this very podcast. It's our second episode. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And thank you for having me today.
Excellent. I'm glad that you're here. So today we'll be talking about the program that you've been setting up within the Lufthansa Group, about the role of data and specifically equipping people with data-driven decision-making skills. Yeah, but before we do that, maybe it would be great to learn a little bit more about you. So what's your background? What affiliation do you have with data literacy programs, and how have you applied that in your own personal career?
Sure. So I've been in data, advanced analytics and data science and data strategy for the last 20 years. Most of that has been in consulting and in a number of different verticals. So thinking about areas like healthcare, insurance, education, grocery, retailing, and consumer products. And throughout that journey, data has changed a lot. We've gone from things where, you have to write thousands of lines of code to query data, and it could take 2 or 3 days to get your results, to now, streaming data and getting results on the edge. So throughout that journey, I personally have had to learn a lot and upskill myself over the course of those years to stay current and stay on the cutting edge of those technologies and that data. And so I think I just have a personal passion for making sure people feel empowered and equipped to understand data and use it, across all areas of their life, but specifically in their business to transform it and drive it forward. Because there really is so much power in data and what you can do with it. There always has been, but I think now more than ever, it's more accessible and democratized than ever. So I think I just have a personal passion for that.
Excellent. Yeah, you use the word data democratization. I think that's one of those things that a lot of people talk about, specifically in large organizations, but it's hard to get that topic into practice, so to say. Yeah? Specifically helping people or enabling people, empowering people to access data, but more importantly, actually to make the data-driven decisions around that. So what kind of organizations did you see in the past or out there in the world where you believe that data and democratization and data literacy is really understood and utilized in an effective way?
Well, I think that's a lot of great topics you touched on there. I think first of all, just starting with data democratization and what that means, I think a lot of people interpret that as kind of giving people just access to data. Mm-hmm. So if I throw a lot of data at you, surely you can just do something with it and change our business or make your job different. But the truth is that data democratization is a lot different than that. You have to make data comfortable to access. You have to give the people the right tools to access the data so that they actually feel comfortable using the data and working with it, and then a space for their insights to go. So data democratization to me isn't just kind of giving people access, but it's how you let people work with it comfortably, and then also how you do data governance so that people can access it securely. A lot of different industries and companies have used data democratization in a great way. I think, companies like Netflix and Uber, they have the benefit of kind of starting with easily accessible data, that their business model started with being founded on data. Yes. But then you actually have a lot of legacy companies that have been around for a really long time that I think have also been really effective. If you think about companies like Disney or Nike, who have started really understanding their customers in completely different ways and transform the way their businesses and their industries operate. But I think anyone from the smallest school to the largest company can use their data to transform the way that they work and make their lives easier and their customers' lives easier.
Excellent. Yeah, there's always a little bit of a hesitation, I feel, for people who are starting to embark, so to say, on their data-driven journey. A sense of being uncomfortable about utilizing data. There's this hard skill, using SQL or building dashboards, and also a little bit more of the soft skills. It's great to have all of this data, and then but how to actually use this, basically, is a big question. Do you see when you're running and setting up data literacy programs for people who are starting out in the sphere of data science or utilizing data in the day-to-day decision making, between those two hard and soft skills, and how do you go about that in making people feel comfortable utilizing their data more effectively?
Yeah, I think another great question. I mean, the first thing I try to do is really just to show people how much they already know, because I think people often feel intimidated by data and data topics. You know, there's this image of data science as kind of being this thing that surely, that's for other people, that's not for me to do. So the first thing I try to do is just kind of break down those barriers and just start out by beating some buzzwords, you know, like what's BI, what's business intelligence, what's AI, what's artificial intelligence, and give people the time to just sort of sit with these topics and give them a chance to ask me, you know, what do these really mean? And, you know, how does my understanding differ from what might actually be? So that's the first thing I kind of start with. And then once people get more comfortable just with the terms, because it's really what, you know, we want people to kind of be data citizens, to feel comfortable using these terms, understanding them, and then applying them in their own lives. But then we get into some more of like, kind of, I guess, the harder skill topics. So sometimes people feel very comfortable working in a tool like Excel, but it's hard for them to make the translation between what does my data look like in Excel, and then what does it look like if I'm using code to query it. And so then I just try to kind of compare and contrast how we use data in those different tools and kind of show that it's really not that different, that writing code is just really another tool like Excel, but it just has that much more power and is much more unlimited than something like Excel, and also easier to understand the quality and do things on a much larger scale and much more rapidly. So, but basically really just starting with deconstructing their kind of preconceived notions about how scary data science is, and then getting them more comfortable with how we use these new technologies.
Disenchanting the word data science and artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And make it more practical.
Exactly.
in a day-to-day operations. Do you see like there's also a difference between people who are leaders within their organizations and people who are like professionals in their day-to-day organizations, the way that they approach the topic of data and the way that they kind of try and utilize data on a day-to-day business?
Sure. I mean, I think at every level we can use data and work within teams to kind of leverage the power of data. And we've actually identified 5 different personas when it comes to people's data maturity and their data literacy. So I guess I would just start actually with the data amateurs, and those are kind of the people I was talking about before, where maybe they're a little bit afraid of data, they don't know how to use it, they might actually not want to learn it because it feels like too much to them. And we really want to, again, like empower them with the tools and kind of the terminology to be able to become more like data citizens. And the data citizens are the people who can work with data science teams, who understand the place of data in their own work. I mean, maybe they don't want to be a data scientist, that's okay, but we should all feel comfortable working with and using data in this day and age. And then the next group is really sort of the emerging data professionals. And these are people who really have either self-identified a need that they would like to upskill themselves, they would like to become more proficient with data, or maybe even their job requires it because jobs are changing over time as people are leveraging data differently. And so we're trying to equip these people then with really a lot of tools and resources and mentorship and coaching and kind of give them a longer term path to becoming more advanced in their analytics capabilities or in their professionalism with data. And then of course we have the data professionals. These are people who are probably naturally more inclined to use data and to get excited about the potential and the possibilities. For them, you know, thinking about creating use cases, you know, they already have that kind of critical thinking mindset and see the power, but then it's a matter of how do you embed that power practically in a business setting. So not just creating great models, but where do those models go and how do they land in a practical sense to drive the business. And then of course the 5th persona would be the data leaders, I guess the business leaders who we want to become data leaders. Many of them already are, but some also, you know, didn't grow up, I guess, with this sense of data and how to use it. So how do we kind of coach them to, you know, build a data culture in their organizations, which I think is the most important first step, like giving people the power and the resources and the support to drive their own data use cases, but then also as leaders need to also be able to identify use cases so that they can make the right investments in technology and then their people to bring those use cases to life. So we're really trying to address people at every stage of their journey and every level of the organization and every type of job family. Essentially, data has a place for everyone, and we want to be able to show people that and empower them to get there.
Excellent. Yeah, I think tailoring like the topic of data science to each and every people's specific needs on the day-to-day basis is the right way to address or make data a relevant topic, because it can be something that's very generic. Everyone's talking about data, but how exactly data works for their business is always a little bit of the question. And specifically commercial aviation has the luxury that they're basically sitting on top of such a deep breadth of data which is not always available or readily available to be used by managers or by analysts or by crew managers or network planners or revenue managers or any of the professionals in commercial aviation. But there is this unique set of data that can be tapped. How do you generate an appetite to start using that data every day and make data-driven decisions for the day-to-day business? As well as how do you believe that the topic of data literacy is tailored or should be uniquely tailored to commercial aviation?
I think that's another, a great question again. I mean, aviation in particular, it's been around for a long time, and especially airlines that have been around a long time have created these massive amounts of data that haven't historically, the data hasn't been collected in a way that's easy to access necessarily. So a lot of times, you might have a data warehouse sitting somewhere that you need to call someone and ask them about it if you want to get any information from it. So I think first of all, it's about coaching people to understand that data is a business asset and something that, some people actually think, oh, we have to get into that data set. It's so painful. It's such a pain. It's too big and massive. It's messy. But what I try to show them is the potential of that data. So if we cleaned it up, if we spent the time, if we could use machine learning and artificial intelligence to fill in the gaps in our data, what we could do with it. So kind of painting that picture of, hey, this isn't a painful process. This is actually an exciting process, I think is one way. Another way is to talk about people's pain points, because I think when you talk about people's pain points, it often comes down to a lack of data, a lack of information, or a lack of understanding about how to get the data that they can use in an everyday setting in their lives without making it more complicated. So in talking about their pain points, again, kind of starting to paint a picture. If we could generate this data, if we could fill in this data, if we could collect it and stream it to you differently or within an application that you already use, what the potential is. So I think a lot of it is just kind of showing people, it's not about bringing in a data scientist and giving me a whole new application that I'm never going to have time to open. But it's about understanding how to embed solutions in their existing ways of working to make their lives easier. And if you're not a data citizen, it's really hard to kind of make that connection. And so by coaching people to understand the potential here, then it's a lot easier to then, when we embed machine learning or artificial intelligence in their applications, to convince them that it's worth it, and worth it to them personally, not just the business, but to them, their own selves.
Yeah, you touched upon the topic of change, so that jobs change over time. I mean, you gave an example of your personal life as well, how the topic of data science in and of itself has been changing over time, and data becomes more readily available and utilized and usable every day. How would you go about addressing people who are a little bit more skeptical of that change? So how would you generate an appetite for data literacy, data-driven decision-making, topics around machine learning and artificial intelligence for them, people who are maybe a little bit more skeptical towards the topic, or maybe a little bit more resistant towards the change that I think inevitably is going to happen, and ideally also makes our lives a lot easier, or at least we try and always build machine learning applications, and we always build machine learning applications that make people's lives easier. So how do you address that skepticism or a little bit of that worry about change?
Sure. I mean, I can say I've seen a lot of change in the last 20 years. And I think our natural reaction, if our lives are going to change by potentially external forces, our first reaction is always going to be a little bit of resistance, right? Like, oh, this is different from what I'm used to. I'm not sure I'm excited about this. How is it? I was kind of comfortable before, and now maybe I have to act differently. So I do have a lot of experience with that feeling. But what I've always found is that if you become part of the change, you have more power. You have more power to shape how that change works out for you personally, and how it works out for your business, and how it works out in your personal life. So I would say it's okay to be skeptical. I mean, there are different questions coming up with the advances that have been happening recently in artificial intelligence. I think it's okay to be skeptical, but I would encourage people to be part of the change, because that will enable them to actually help shape it. And I think the other piece is, like, things do change. And so if you decide you're not going to be a part of it, then there could be consequences. So I just try to encourage people to kind of be a part of the change, because that will give them more power later on to shape how it looks for them.
Excellent. Yeah, be part of the change to shape it in the future direction that you think is helpful for you and your team. I think that's the right approach. Maybe you can give us an example of people who entered, so to say, a data literacy program very skeptically, and ultimately had a change of heart or understood the concepts of data science a lot better. Do you have an example of that? Someone who joined And then after a data literacy program and equipping them with the right tools, the right insights, and the right methodologies and thinking about data science really made it practically approachable and usable for their day-to-day lives.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's my favorite thing about this kind of program, about building data literacy in our as a capacity, as a ability with our colleagues. I mean, almost every training I enter into, I like to read the room and see, what kinds of people do I have in the training. And almost always there's going to be at least one or two people who I can tell are wondering if this is the right spot for them today, right? But my goal is always by the end of the day to have them smiling and engaging with me and talking about these different topics and starting to see the potential. I think more specifically, we did set up more of a ongoing long-term mentorship program with some of those emerging data professionals I talked about before, where we gave them some online training spanning 4 or 5 months, but then every month we would also come in and give mentorship sessions. So, half-day mentorship sessions designed to reinforce the topics they learned about, but also give them some more hands-on practice. And again, just a little bit of time and headspace to kind of ask their questions. And I would say at the beginning of that program, nearly half of the colleagues felt very overworked and stressed and feeling like they didn't have the kind of time to complete the online learning, which was significant, and then also spend the time in the mentorship sessions. It felt like a big investment to them. But by the end of the program, the kinds of questions they were asking and the use cases they started talking about, to me, more than any feedback they could have given me, showed me how much they had learned over the course of time and how they were actually thinking about doing their jobs differently. And then I think most impactful and meaningful to me was that these colleagues actually wrote a piece for Lufthansa, for our internet site, the full company internet, about how much this mentorship program meant to them. It was a full page. And I think the fact that they would go to that kind of effort after already spending that significant amount of time investing in themselves to actually also write this article talking about the program, I mean, that meant the world to me, because I felt like we really made a difference in those colleagues' lives and hopefully in the business.
Absolutely. That's, ultimately, if people understand a new concept and can practically use it and see their day-to-day benefits coming out of that, I think that's really a beautiful thing, because it's such an empowering thing to become like data-driven and to understand the concept of data better, because ultimately you're dealing with facts and you have a lot of business hypotheses and you want to get them answered through data, and it can be a very empowering experience for professionals at any time of their career. I'd be curious as well to learn if you've also experienced a lot of, like, from the persona that you described before, so the business leader persona. Are there like any big misconceptions that business leader personas have when it comes to the topic of data science, data-driven decision making, and machine learning? And how do you address those misconceptions to actually unlock the potential that data has for their team and for their organization?
Yeah, I think there are some misconceptions out there. I think probably the main one is thinking that in maybe hiring a data scientist or hiring a team of data scientists, that then their business will be different. And I think that to me is kind of one of the biggest barriers, because it takes a full team of people to kind of bring a data science use case to life.
It's a cultural change.
It's a cultural change, exactly. It's not a hiring change, it's a cultural change. And kind of enabling people to ask those questions that may sound stupid, but may lead to something awesome, or to help them understand the importance of it's okay to fail. We're going to make mistakes, but we want to fail fast and we want to fail cheap. Like, building a culture like that is more than just kind of showing a presentation and saying, okay, we're going to be agile, we're going to fail fast, and we're going to fail cheaply. But then in real life, people get in trouble, or there's not really the attention paid to it to make it useful. I think that's probably the biggest misconception. But I've also found that data leaders actually do have a hunger for learning more as well, but they need a safe space to admit that. So I think, to me, that's the first step in changing your culture, is just actually having your leaders understand that they might not have all the answers right away, but that we're going to learn together and get there. And I think that mentality is the one that's most transformative.
And it's a change in mentality. And how do you create that appetite then? It's like also an appetite for change, but maybe a little bit different from the people who are starting out on a data journey, or people who are already data professionals and already have some sort of or a lot of experience in using data daily. Is there also a change in how you approach business leaders to generate an appetite for becoming more data driven and changing the culture of their organization to become more of a data driven organization? That's
a great question. I do think it's a process with a lot of different steps, but a lot of times we can share our own successes, but also our failures. So talking about things that failed, but then went on a better path. Talking about cases where people didn't change quickly enough or didn't transform their data culture, but still tried to implement a use case and just failed horribly. Like trying to kind of paint that picture of here's what happens when you don't use data effectively, when you don't have a data culture, but look what happens when you do. And kind of, again, really highlighting and inspiring leaders to kind of think differently about their use cases. But also kind of bring an element of realism, because I think that helps build trust. Sometimes use cases might not be super cheap. They might not be super easy. They might take a lot of time and effort investment that's not gloriously pretty. Cleaning a data warehouse is not the most fanciest, it's not a fancy new machine learning methodology, but it's so important.
Yes.
It's not too sexy, but like showing them how sexy the results are, I think, and getting them excited about that is kind of one way to do that. But there are, it's kind of a longer term process, I think, to change hearts and minds. But our goal is to accelerate that.
Well, with that, I think we've covered the entire importance of a topic like data literacy programs. So addressing people's maybe fears or questions around the role data science and machine learning has on their day-to-day business, as well as the importance of setting a company culture or an organizational culture that's focused on failing fast, using data to make decisions and not just gut feeling or whatever people learn in business school, but really learn how to ask hypotheses and have data provide the answers they need to drive the company forward. And how important it is not to just have a team that is using data, quote unquote, but actually understands how to use data effectively and sees where it can be of help and where sometimes it cannot be of help, and the interpersonal part is more important. And Marie, thank you so much for, first of all, creating this data literacy program as a service to our customers so that they can actually start using the data that their organization already has in an effective way, but also for the conversation today. I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to continue this data-driven journey with you as well.
Thank you so much, Manuel. Me as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear passengers, thanks for choosing zeroG. We hope you had a great and informative flight. See you next time.